Hello, it's Dr. Edward, the healing vet here. And did you know that you can do a lot of harm to your dog by training them if you use, shall we say, less than helpful methods to do so? Now, I want to make it really clear that, in my opinion, there is absolutely no place in dog training for using any so-called tool that causes fear or pain to make the dog do what you want them to do. Or indeed any animal. The use of fear or pain, which is aversive conditioning, is, apart from anything else, is flat out lazy, in my opinion. It takes away the need for the trainer to develop higher levels of skill in terms of growing in sensitivity to the animal's communication, in the ability to communicate with the animal in the way they understand, and it implies a really deep lack of respect for the animal. There is inevitably going to be a severe lack of understanding and listening to the dog if you are going to depend on things like shock collars, prong collars, check chains, or using any kind of domination, fear or pain in your training. Don't do it. I grew up being taught how to do that, and I've got to tell you that I've worked with quite a number of dogs whose behaviour problems and anxiety and trauma has been made a whole lot worse by trainers using shock collars on them. It's not uncommon for aversive training methods like this to shut the dog down. And this paradoxically can make them a whole lot more unpredictable and dangerous if they're put in a stressful position. They can suddenly burst into aggression and cause a whole lot of harm. Now, I also don't like using only or overusing positive rewards, or what I call bribing dogs with treats. And you can also put in toys in this category. Overusing toys as a motivator to manipulate your dogs into doing what you want. For me, this is also often a real barrier to true understanding, communication and respect between me and the dog I'm working with. If I'm working with a dog and it's just thinking about where's the next yum, where's the next yummy thing, where's the next yummy thing, I want the yummy thing, they are indeed motivated, but they're also going to be distracted from actually tuning into what I'm doing in terms of my communication with my body language. And I've seen a few positive reward only dogs who were also never asked to do anything they didn't want to do in their whole life. I don't actually think that's good for dogs, and these dogs were fat, disengaged, spoiled, and really not very happy dogs, in my opinion. Now, a big part of training is dealing with behavioural problems. I work with a lot of dogs with behavioural issues, with anxiety, with reactivity, with aggression, with overexcitement. And I find that there's usually two underlying problems that you really need to think about and make sure that your dog doesn't have these underlying issues going on before you start training them. Because these problems are big drivers of what humans consider to be undesirable or harmful or bad behaviours in dogs. And most treatment approaches in the Western medical model don't understand these issues properly and aren't great at treating them either, for a range of reasons that I'm going to go into. So, you know, when it comes to training, and I'm going to talk about the process I use in training animals a little bit later, but I want to talk about this first because I think we need to cover this before we can really have a meaningful conversation about training your animals. So, pain is a huge factor in just about every dog that has behavioural problems that humans are struggling with. According to my clinical research, about 70% of the dogs I see overall have soft tissue pain, neurofascial pain. And remember that neurofascial pain is completely invisible to all diagnostic imaging. The only way that you can work out what's going on in terms of soft tissue pain is by a hands-on assessment and learning how to read the animal's responses to that. And about 53% of all the dogs I see have significant silent soft tissue pain, neurofascial pain, that their owners don't even know is there. And pain that many vets miss when they examine dogs too, because most vets have never even been taught about neurofascial pain and they have not been taught how to assess for it properly. It's easy to learn how to do that. If you don't know how to do it, you can't do it. It's that simple, a bit like riding a bicycle. So pain is a super important factor in just about every behaviour case I see. If you get a dog that's reactive, aggressive, displaying anxiety, there will nearly always be a pain component, and you need to have your animal assessed or learn how to assess them yourself for neurofascial pain, which is by far the most common cause of this really serious silent pain issue that we see, that many pet parents and many vets miss. You can learn how to do this yourself with our online training, with the Whole Energy Body Balance Bodywork for Pets. Email me or message me if you'd like to get a 60% discount off that because you're reading the blog. I'd love to give you a discount. So when you relieve soft tissue pain with neurofascial bodywork, which is what the Whole Energy Body Balance Bodywork is, you'll often see really significant improvements in problem behaviours, and I've seen this again and again and again in my practice. Aggressive, reactive dogs becoming calm and happy and normal. Anxious dogs becoming happier. Now, there's a couple of factors. So pain is the first one. The second one that is so important and that I see in nearly every case of badly behaved dogs is poor boundaries from the humans. Yes, that's you. Humans in general are absolutely awful at communicating and holding clear boundaries around their personal space with their dogs. If you can't clearly and kindly communicate to your dog with your body language and a quiet command, something like out, just like that, out, that you'd like them to stop at the edge of your personal bubble and stay out of your personal bubble a metre or so away from you. And if you can't do that and have your dog go, okay, cool, you want me to be out of your space, I'm perfectly happy to be out of your space, then you have a boundary issue with your animals. If your animals either ignore that or push to come in or jump all over you and will not go out when you ask them to, this will be contributing to behaviour problems every time. And we talk a lot in the Whole Energy Body Balance method about how to teach dogs to respect your boundaries in a kind and loving way. And it's very important to help with anxiety and a whole range of other behaviour issues. The third problem is over-arousal. So humans, we are monkeys and we love to razz up our dogs and do exciting, high stimulation, high impact play with our dogs. But if you have the idea that the only happy dog is an excited dog, it's a big problem, because a lot of humans teach their dogs how to be crazy, but we never teach our dogs how to relax and settle. And this is a big factor in behaviour issues, and it's a big factor in being able to train your dog effectively, because if your dog's over here in crazy land, super aroused, super excited, their brain turns off. And you can't train them, you can't communicate with them, they can't make good decisions until you help them move into relaxation. And again, that's a key thing that the Whole Energy Body Balance work really helps with. Okay, so now that we've got through that foundational stuff, which is super important to understand, what I want to do is talk a little bit about my approach to how I work with training dogs. So, number one, I don't ever want to dominate dog, I don't ever want to use pain and fear. But I don't really use treats either. The only time that I use treats is if when I'm first meeting an anxious, fearful dog that's got a high food drive to make friends. Now, if you don't use treats and you don't use aversives, that leaves you in an interesting place, because now, this is not the easy way, but in my opinion, it's by far the best way. It's it's more challenging. You're going to have to develop your skills to a much higher level to train effectively without depending on treats or sticks, like without depending on the carrot or the stick. You're going to have to find a middle way, which is going to involve you really upskilling your ability to communicate with your dog in a way that they understand. Now, I'm talking about training for day-to-day living here, having a dog that I can live with happily in my home. I'm not so much talking about competition training where, yes, then you may want to use reward training, toys, treats, stuff like that. But it's a different thing that I'm talking about. And even in competition, I would be encouraging you to consider throwing away all your either your treats or your aversives, if you're still using them, and I sincerely hope for the sake of your dogs that you're not. Throw them away and then start working with your dog, and you're going to find out where your bond is and where the respect levels and where the understanding levels are between you and your dog very, very quickly. And if you can't work with your dog without these crutches, we have a problem in the end, in my opinion. So how do you work with them? I want my dogs to respond to and respect and understand my communication without treats or bribes and without fear. I want to build a relationship. I want to build understanding with my dogs. I want them to respond to my request because they like me and they trust me, because they understand me, and because they know that I am listening to and responding to their communication with me as well. It takes a lot more work, a lot more sensitivity, a lot more flexibility, and a way higher degree of skill in terms of your ability to interact with your dog. It's significantly more difficult than zapping your dog with a shock collar, no matter how good your timing is, no matter how good the results you get, because you can get great results with a shock collar, but it will come at an inevitable cost to your dog in terms of mental emotional trauma. And it's also significantly more difficult to work and train this way than using treats to bribe your dog to do what you want them to do. So I challenge you, if you're very dependent on treats, spend a little bit of time every week working with your dog on training without any treats. You're gonna find out some interesting frustrations and expansion in your skills when you do that. So, and I want my dog to listen to me and do what I ask when it's reasonable. I'm okay when my dogs say, no, I don't want to do that, sometimes, because I actually really love it, because if my dogs are thinking for themselves and trying to do what they want and not necessarily what I want, it shows me that I have not crushed their spirit for a start, that they still have their own mind and will, and I want to respect that. But I will insist really firmly that they do what I ask if there's danger involved, you know. I will step in and be firm, really firm, and take the lead when there's a possibility that there might be harm coming to my animals. I do not want that to happen. I use a lot of touch in my communication and training with dogs. A large part of the whole energy body balance method is working with dogs in terms of using touch and gentle pressure and release as a tactile conversation, as a somatic training process. And I can train anxious dogs to learn how to relax themselves from anxiety with intentional touch with the web method. I can teach you how to start doing this in 15 minutes or less. And when you do this, when you teach your dogs how to relax, no matter what's going on, if they get anxious and aroused and crazy, you can help them move over to sane and sensible and calm and grounded. It's so much easier to teach them how to do things that you want them to do. Some of the positive responses I've seen in dogs that have even been on a heap of behaviour drugs that haven't worked have been amazing with this hands-on tactile approach, and a lot of how I work with dogs in training is deeply influenced by my early life in working with horses. So getting animals, if you want to get an animal that weighs half a tonne to yield to pressure, you've got to do it in a way that they understand, because using force with an animal that big well, people still use force, but it's brutal and it's not needed. And you can do the same thing with your dogs in terms of having this conversation about yielding to pressure, releasing the pressure, being soft and moving with touch. And I get great results with this. It's definitely not the easiest way. In fact, it's probably the hardest way in a lot of ways to train your dog. But for me, it's the best way because I'm really having to stretch myself in terms of my skills and sensitivities in interacting with the dogs, and it really respects my dogs so that they can be their beautiful selves and still have their unique will and beingness, and me not crush that either with fear and pain or by totally bribing them into a state of compliance with lollies all the time. I don't think either of these approaches are in the end the best thing for the animal. And a bit of my inspiration from this comes from the best book about parenting that I've ever read, which is Unconditional Parenting by Alfie Kohn, K-O-H-N. And he has a whole lot of research to show that punishment is harmful and too much reward is harmful too. And finding the middle road is not the easy way, but I encourage you to give it a go because it is, in my opinion, the most beautiful way to connect with and grow together with your beautiful dogs. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another video.